Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Matty.
And I'm your co-host Jacob, and today's episode is our 1 year special. So long time coming. We've been talking about it for a while. It's pretty crazy that we've actually done this now for a whole year.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. We sort of started it, as you said, a year ago, and things have changed quite a lot since then. Both with what we've been doing on here. You know, we've got the new trope format, and we've got the new sort of graphics and stuff that have been released recently. And yeah, obviously a lot has changed in the world as well. So nothing stands still.
Yeah, no, it's cool because another thing as well is like it's cool that we've like stuck to it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's fun to see us. Like if you watch it from the beginning to now, you can see us like move through the seasons. Like our hair gets longer, our beards get like more crazy, the clothes that we're wearing, we've got hoodies on, then we're back in t-shirts, it's light, it's dark, so it's quite funny. But no, I'd agree with you. We've had a lot of changes. We've shifted how the podcast works. We tried to do some fun stuff with lore. We've changed all of the graphics. We've launched Twope News, which is this week on planet Earth. So just for any listeners that haven't heard us say that, when we say Twope News, that's our abbreviation for it. But yeah, it's been crazy. And the one thing as well that I'd say is I've learned an incredible amount within the last year of this. And I think that's like my favorite thing about doing this podcast, really, is just that it's kind of not forced me, but every week I've done a little bit of research on something that I probably wouldn't have Googled if we hadn't have decided to do an episode on it. So it's been quite cool. I've managed to stay like on the top of things with like technology and science, probably the first time in my life. So that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of given me a reason to explore more sort of different areas. So, you know, obviously we both have our interests. Yours is more sort of like the space stuff and the sort of exploration and sort of far future things. And then my stuff is obviously sort of more grounded things. But I think that's sort of really worked for us in that we have a bit of crossover and obviously sort of some shared interests, but like we both bring different interests to it. So you learn about stuff that I'm interested in, I learn about stuff that you're interested in. It's sort of, I think it's made the show quite interesting, hopefully for the listeners as well. So
yeah, no, I'd agree with you. And like, I know we've said this a couple of times, but for anyone that doesn't know, me and Matty still haven't actually met in person. This has completely been a lockdown project, and that's pretty cool in itself because like it's just nuts that like we've never actually met, but we've talked about so many wild topics.
And I think we've mentioned it in previous episodes, but we actually live about 10 miles apart. At one point, like I was working in your hometown, so it's a bit weird, but you know, maybe one day we will meet in person.
Yeah, hopefully by our second year special, we will have met or at least gone to the pub by then. But yeah, so for this episode, what we thought we would do, and if you've been keeping an eye on social medias, you might have an idea because we've been posting polls and all sorts of fun things. But what we thought we would do is kind of have a look back on the year and discuss like my favorite episode, Matty's favorite episode, ones that we struggled with, ones that we found really interesting, and then have a look at the poll that we put out and see what our listeners most enjoyed, what was our most downloaded episode, and kind of just have a chat about how things have gone, because I think this will be the 38th episode, 38 or 37th. I think it's 38. And in that, we've only recently started doing like series. So there was a time where we were just blitzing topics. I think for like the first 18 or 17, we were doing a different topic every week. So we've covered some ground. And it's fun to, like, this week doing the research. It's quite fun because we just got to look at what we've done. And it's pretty crazy, the list that we've got.
Yeah, I think that, well, just on the topic, I think that shift towards more the series stuff, I think, has allowed us to go into a lot more detail on topics, because sort of just looking back, and we'll come on to sort of our favourites and some of the episodes themselves. Like those first ones, those first 17 were quite about an hour's length, and they almost sort of didn't fit together in any real way, did they? We were sort of like bouncing all over the place, which in some ways was good because it meant that we did a lot of different things. But I think definitely in terms of like getting more information across people and allowing us to go deeper into stuff, the series format's been good, and I've really enjoyed doing that. So yeah,
no, I'd agree with you, and like that's another thing too. So like you can see that at the beginning of our podcast, because for all of our listeners and people that watch on YouTube and everything, when we were starting out, it was also a bit of an icebreaker for me and you, and we kind of came up with the idea that we would take turns each week picking a topic, and you can see that from the start. Like we both agreed on space debris because I think that was something that me and you were both quite passionate about, but then you could see it kind of like flip-flop between me and you, because it's like Fermi paradox, which is an obvious thing I'm interested in, then chaos theory, which is something that you were interested in, and so on. And it's cool because, like you're saying, you can see for the first 17 we're kind of going through a lot of stuff, and whilst they are a little bit longer in length each episode, they're not really, because even though some of them might be an hour and a half, that was kind of it. And I've really enjoyed doing the series, especially on like artificial intelligence and stuff like that, where we've managed to just kind of like have hours for like little sub categories within it. And that's been really fun because it's actually allowed me to learn it better too, because I don't have to focus on such a big thing one week. I can kind of break it down into like 4 or 5 weeks, which I'm hoping listeners and watchers kind of get to. And if they don't like a certain aspect of it, they can kind of just tune out for that week.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been interesting also, we sort of revisited some of those early topics as well. So some of the early topics we did were on sustainable energy and on automation and stuff, and we sort of came back to those in sort of the series and went into them in more detail, so that was quite good. And I imagine we'll probably do it with some of the other episodes at some point, revisit things and sort of talk about different aspects of it as well. So yeah,
sure. So I'll kick off this then. So my favorite episode so far that we've done, I would say, is probably our first episode, Space Debris. Just because when you look back on it, it's fun to watch the video. If anybody wants to go and watch it on YouTube, me and Matty surprisingly look younger, and I'm not sure why. I don't know. I don't know if it's just because we've not got beards, or if I'm not wearing a cap, or whatever it is. But we look quite young. But for me, I thought that episode was really good because we were trying to like make things work. That was really the first time that we'd actually had a discussion, because from what I remember, like the week before when we were trying to record the trailer, it took us so many outtakes because we just couldn't get used to like the whole like talking on webcam thing. But for me, the Space Debris one was good because we both obviously were passionate about it. It was really fun to talk about it. And from what I gathered too, like there were a lot of listeners for our first episode that were very welcoming and nice. I remember us getting quite a lot of love on social media, as that was kind of the first topic that we did. And I'm sure at some point we'll return to that one because it's a big thing. And as I was saying to you, for the day that we were recording this, the old co-founder of Apple has launched a private space company to help clean up all the space debris. So it's cool that when we first started talking about this a year ago, I think there's been a few on Twope News as well that we've discussed, that loads of companies seem to be cropping up and tackling this issue, which is really good, because it would suck if we would be a year on and there'd been nothing done about it.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, this one, because this was sort of back in the early episodes when we were doing like one episode each with one of us sort of presenting it, sort of thing. This was one of my episodes because I had a bit of sort of interesting background in it.
Yeah.
But I remember at the time being sort of thinking like, oh, this is something that I've done a bit of research about and sort of people are aware of, but nobody's really doing anything about. And I think sort of thinking back to that episode, like a bit of the episode was about like we should be doing more, we should be sort of doing something in sort of to tackle space debris. And then only in the last sort of year since we did that episode has a lot happened on it. You know, it's like it's making a lot of news. Like you said, the thing today with Steve Wozniak launching a company that's sort of tackling space debris. It's come up in a few news items of companies that are sort of looking at this. There was a scare last week about, I think, a Russian satellite had a potential. I've sort of seen a few things about sort of defunct satellites maybe colliding with one another over the last year.
Wasn't there a Starlink going to hit the UK as well last week? Am I right in thinking that? Or there was a chance that it could?
Yeah, I think that does ring a bell, but it seems that like over the last year, like it's become quite mainstream news. Like it comes up in the media. And obviously, I don't want to take all of the credit, you know, and say that we got this on everyone's radar. But it's a bit weird that, like, certainly from my sort of perception before that, it was just really like an interest piece, and then since then, it's become quite mainstream. So.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. And one thing that I will say that has been weird about this topic, this podcast, is not every like topic that we have chosen has had this effect, but there have been a few episodes that we have chosen, and then that week something like drastic has happened within it, because it's the same for like the second episode. If you remember when we did the Fermi paradox and we were talking about the idea of life, there was the Venus announcement with the phosphine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then we also had the episode on the internet where we were talking about echo chambers and politics, and then the Capitol in Washington got like stormed.
Wow. It's funny you say that. I'll bring it up now because that is the one that I listed as my favorite episode.
There you go. So number 16, yeah?
Yeah, number 16, Internet and Digital Communication. This was back in January of 2021. And yeah, it was the day that the storm of the Capitol happened, and it was literally happening as we were talking about it. We were talking about how sort of the internet can be a force for good and be a force for bad, and how people can get sort of caught up in these echo chambers, and whether companies like Twitter and Facebook should be able to sort of censor people, or whether they should be sort of public spaces where anyone can speak. And why we were talking about this, Donald Trump was getting banned off of Twitter, and all sorts of things were happening. It was a bit weird.
Yeah, we obviously didn't know either, did we? Because we were recorded, so we didn't have like any of the social media like notifications or anything going off. And I remember me and you were just talking about like whether or not people should be banned, if it can be dangerous being in a lockdown and people just reading their news feeds and stuff. And then I remember coming off the show from recording with you and literally going downstairs and messaging you being like, what is happening? Our episode of what we were saying might happen and could happen is literally happening.
Yeah, it was a strange one, and that for me was why I picked it as my favorite episode, because it sort of showed that, well, firstly it was sort of quite current with stuff, and hopefully the sort of audience appreciate it as well, as we've tried to talk about interesting things that are relevant and happening now, and it doesn't get any more relevant than that. And also I remember even though we didn't know what was going sort of down at the time, out of all the episodes, and I love it when we do this, it just went off on a complete tangent. And although I put it as my favorite episode, I think it's one of the episodes that I most like to come back to, because I don't think we really discussed anything that we had planned.
No, I'd agree with you. And I actually really love that aspect of the podcast too, because so for anybody listening now, when we kind of plan our episodes, we're quite broad, aren't we? We kind of just we've got like a list of topics that we've got written down on a Google Drive, and we kind of just look at them, pick them, or like pick a series, and then we kind of just go away, do our research, and then keep in touch throughout the week on where we're kind of at. So both of us are kind of on a similar wavelength, and then we kind of just come at the microphones and have a discussion. But yeah, I'd agree with you. I really enjoy it when we have our like tangent episodes that we or we get freaked out by it or start talking about it because we've thought about it a little bit now and it's kind of freaked us out. Because another one for me like that was the Living Forever one. Like I really went into that episode being like, yeah, I could totally want to live forever. And when we started like learning about how they suck all the blood out of you, put this gel in you and all this kind of stuff, it really freaked me out. But I would say my favorite tangents are probably the ones in artificial intelligence, because although we were really focused for that series and it's a 5-parter, towards the end of every episode we start wondering about like what it would mean for that AI within that episode. And some of the stuff that we would talk about was really funny. I remember we kept talking about like robot bin men and bin women, didn't we? And how we'd have to be respectful to them, but why would you have to be respectful to them?
Yeah, the AI one is another sort of area which changed so much over the last year, and particularly with like lockdown and a lot of things going digital. This is now an area which, again, I think people have sort of started to think about seriously, and we've seen it over the last year. Sort of quite a big growth in people being quite concerned about AI, and concerned in a very different way, because the sort of historical sort of concerns that people have when you ask, if you went back 5-10 years, would be that AI would sort of take over the world and kill us all, and there would be like some sort of like superhuman robotic race that's just going to sort of demolish us, which some people are still concerned about. But much more than that is this idea of people just losing jobs and vast sectors of industry just becoming completely redundant. And it comes up quite a lot in the trope news stuff. And I think one of the most recent ones, I brought up a piece about how advertising agencies were able to like use AI to pitch adverts at individual people, and it's stuff like that again, sort of similar to the space debris that people are sort of becoming aware of and sort of reading more about. So yeah.
No, I'd agree with you. I think that's another thing that I've really enjoyed about this podcast, is that the stuff that, like you're saying, the stuff that we have talked about has kind of been able to like go on and evolve. Obviously not everything, because we've talked about some things that don't really have any scientific research involved with them, like the multiverse and stuff like that. But some of the current things that we've done when it comes to like space debris and AI and even like space tourism, that was another one for me that I really, really enjoyed, when we got to look at like all the hotels that they were going to put in orbit and stuff. But that is another thing actually that I'd like to say, like since we started this podcast, there's been a massive boom in like rocket launches. Like just so many, like so many, like when like there's at least an episode kind of thing that something's been launched somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It's just crazy. But yeah, let's move on to I'm not going to say least favorite episode, because I don't think that's very nice to say, because I love all of the content that we have produced, but the ones that we maybe struggled with the most. So for me, it's not that long ago. It's episode 34, The Future of Humanity series, part 5, Agriculture and Food. Now, the only reason why I struggled with this one is because it is just not my area of knowledge or expertise. Like, I've been really enjoying this Future of Humanity series because, as you know me, I'm obsessed with the future. And it's fun watching you ground me all the time, because I always come in with some ridiculous like concept and you're like, maybe in 500 years, but not right now. Let's talk about the next 50 to 100. But the agriculture and food one for me was difficult, because it seems like obviously there's a lot of problems that need to be resolved, and like things with climate change and space exploration. It just seems like a very difficult thing to try and figure out. And it's not that I'm being lazy. It's just, it was a lot to take in. And when you actually look at it from like face value, it doesn't seem very bright, the future of it, does it? Unless we do really start using like AI and new forms of technology and stuff. But yeah, that one for me was kind of an eye opener, because as well, it made me realize that like we do really need to change a lot. I think that's been the fun thing about the future of humanity, because I bet a lot of people, when they clicked on it, they're like, sweet, this is going to be like what humans are going to be up to in the future, like sci-fi, this is going to be wicked. And we've kind of just every episode been like, it doesn't look good unless we change.
No, I think, to be fair, the episodes do usually start off quite positive. Like the first half is usually like, oh wow, look at all this new stuff that we can do. Isn't it going to be awesome? We've got this new flashy gadget. We've got these new techniques that are going to completely change the world. And about halfway through, I think it's fair to say it's usually me that says something dire. We go off on a tangent about how awful it's going to be. But yeah, the agriculture food one, it's interesting that you raise that one, because I was thinking of it too, is that it's one where it's an area where neither of us have a massive amount of sort of background in or sort of knowledge in, so it's quite difficult to do. And I think sort of the medicine and biological ones are quite similar to that, in that we just don't have a lot of information about it, and obviously we're both quite busy, so being able to go out and read all of this stuff to sort of make an episode on is quite difficult. So just if anyone out there has any sort of particular background in biology or food and agriculture and stuff, then please do let us know, because we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, we'd love to get people on the show. That was another thing I wanted to say quickly too. Like, we've been doing this for a year now, and obviously the show setup is me and you, and we just like to chat about things. But we did have one little round table / interview, which I think was, I can't remember when it was. It was back in June. And that was with the UAP Media UK. And I have to say, I really enjoyed like having a discussion. And I think going forward into year 2, I would really like to get a few more people on the show. And like you're saying, maybe some people in like agriculture, maybe some people in biology, any kind of scientists really would be fun too. Like I don't mind if we want to get some like engineers on too, or some ex-employees that used to work at like NASA or SpaceX or anything. You're all welcome, because I enjoyed that, and it's always fun to talk to people too, isn't it? Like me and you, we kind of go off on our rants and everything, but I think it would make for some interesting content to have me and you questioning some people, because we're quite similar with who we enjoy like watching and listening to and kind of following. So here's one for you, Matty. If you could have anyone as a guest on The Infinite Void, who would it be?
Oh dear. I think it would probably, it may be a bit cliche, but sort of an astronaut, someone like Chris Hadfield.
Oh, yes.
So, someone that, you know, obviously I want someone to come on to the podcast that's going to be interesting and have sort of, and be good at talking, obviously, to make a good episode, but just someone who has seen the Earth from such a different perspective and has an engineer, a sort of background in sort of engineering and science, will probably be my go-to pick. What about you?
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. That's a good one. An astronaut is definitely a good decision. I don't know. I think maybe Brian Cox could be pretty cool. I know he's got a podcast called The Infinite Monkey Cage, so we're quite similar. You might want to come on it. But Elon Musk too. I'd always like to chat to Elon Musk, and maybe Lex Fridman too. But I know he's a busy guy.
Yeah,
but yeah, it would be cool to get some more guests on. I think it'd be fun. But what's your most difficult episode or least favorite that we've done?
So mine, and if people know me, they might gasp at this. My least favorite episode was number 6, Cities of the Future.
That's your thing.
It is my thing, and as I've said many times before, in another life I would almost certainly be an architect or a suburban planner or something. Yeah, the reason why I picked it is that I just don't feel like I did the topic justice at all. I had all these great ideas about what I wanted to talk about, and I don't think I really covered any of them. And it wasn't a bad episode, and I enjoyed doing it, but I just feel like I had much more to say than what I did.
Well, it felt. I think that episode is kind of what made us go on to do the Future of Humanity series, wasn't it? Because when we did that, me and you both kind of had that chat where we were like, there is so much that we can do. And I think there was somebody as well on Twitter that was like, this episode needs to be a 12-parter. There's not enough discussion involved in it. But that surprises me. I get that though, because if it's the one that you're passionate about and you didn't mention certain things, then that's going to be fair. It blew my mind regardless, but you tend to do that with all the ones that you suggested me.
Yeah, it's just that yeah, it's just I didn't feel like I gave the topic justice, to be honest. It was it wasn't rushed, but yeah, those, I think it's the same with a lot of those early episodes, is that we had quite, understandably, when we were sort of planning the thing, we came up with a list of, what was it, 10 each sort of episode ideas that we wanted to do. And obviously those sort of 10 were like probably the 10 biggest things that we were interested in and wanted to make episodes about. So those sort of first episodes are really our like core ideas of, if you could talk about anything, what would it be? So I think it goes with a lot of those sort of early episodes. So the chaos theory one as well was one where I had lots to say. And I think it's probably the same with you as well. I think your episodes looking at space tourism and the Fermi paradox, I imagine you could talk about those for hours.
It's one of those things, isn't it, though, too? Because like me and you, this was like the first kind of podcast thing that we'd done. Do you know what I mean? So we were figuring it out too. And it's one thing to have all your notes, and it's another thing to then hit record, because it's just like being at school, isn't it? You just speed through your presentation standing in front of the class, and then it's kind of over. And me and you were like trying to find our footing, trying to figure each other out. Obviously we hadn't really spoken that much before, so we were kind of learning on where to like interrupt each other and kind of understand each other's social cues. But for me,
I feel oh no, you've just ruined my point. I was just going to say, I feel like that's definitely the one thing we've improved on, is sort of our rapport and how we play off each other. But no, I've just spoken over you. So
it's fine. I'd say that we have. I'd say that we've got loads more comfortable. If you watch like the first 3 episodes now and the last 3 episodes now, some people would probably be like, oh, it's like they don't care as much as they used to. But I wouldn't say it's that. I just think that we've gotten a lot more comfortable. Do you know what I mean? Before it wasn't like a chore, because that sounds horrible, but for me it was a little bit nerve-wracking, like the day of recording, because I used to be like, it's Wednesday, we're recording today, I'm a bit nervous, I need to make sure I've got my notes. And if I didn't have my notes, I'd go to work that day and I'd be a little bit not nervous, but I'd be like, I haven't got my notes, and I'm going to get home and I'm going to be a bit stressed, and what happens if I don't find anything, like stuff like that. But like now, because obviously we've moved it to being like every other week, and we chat quite regularly, and we're quite chill on like our group chats and stuff. It's never too much of a worry, and it's never like too stressful, because if we don't want to do a topic, we just don't do it now, because we've got so many on a list. It's not like before where we were like, we need another topic, because we were blitzing them. We've just been doing series. But on the topic of like things that like we'd learn, I know you've just said that you didn't manage to fully say everything that you wanted to say in Chaos Theory, but for me, that episode was like mind blowing. I think in our playlists as well, it's under the playlist Hard Science, and there's only 2 in Hard Science, and it's that and the multiverse one. And it was just because I think Chaos Theory is the only one as well that you can hear Matty read out equations, if I'm right.
Oh yeah, I trailed him. Maybe we could do that again at some point. But I went into the maths on that one, and
which doesn't happen regularly.
No, you sort of had to, but hopefully people found it enjoyable. Yeah, Chaos Theory was what I presented in that. Well, I say presented again. It's just sort of those early episodes are more like a documentary, weren't they, than what we do now?
Yeah.
But what the information I gave them was sort of based on a university lecture I had. And I remember being like a first year physics student watching this Chaos Theory lecture, like, oh, wow, this is something else. Because that, just to sort of recap, the whole point of chaos is that in the normal world, we think of things as being deterministic, like they follow set paths, or being random, and that you can't predict sort of what's going to happen. But chaos theory is this idea that something that is deterministic is something that follows rules can turn chaotic just because you can't know everything about it. And I genuinely think it's quite magical, like watching some of those animations of the things become chaotic and these systems, and then sort of how it comes about, and just seems to like pop up in weird places that you wouldn't expect it to, because by its nature, chaos theory is something that is very difficult to study and put numbers on and quantify, but it just appears in places, and it's very weird. It's one of those things that seems to be sort of woven into the universe, but with no real meaning and no real reason why. So it's something I absolutely love, and I'm glad you found it interesting.
I'm sure at some point we'll probably have to revisit some of the first episodes that we did, and kind of like give them justice again. Not that we did anything wrong with them, but yeah, it's like you're saying, there were definitely a few things that maybe we missed or we wanted to add. So I'm sure in the future we can come back to them. But what episode did you find most interesting?
You mentioned it. It was the episode on living forever.
Okay.
Because I think that was one of the topics that you brought up, you put down. So obviously I knew less about it, but also it was one where we got into some really weird stuff, and it was the reason why I found it so interesting was that I really enjoy the stuff that is, it seems really out there and it seems really weird, but it's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
So when you talk about sort of the space missions that might happen in 500 years time, and you talk about what AI might be doing in 200 years time, that's great, and I enjoy talking about it, but it's not quite the same as when you say, oh yeah, and we can freeze people. Oh, and we're doing it now. That's I just thought it was really sort of weird talking about that stuff, and what we can and where to do and what we might be able to do in the future. So
yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I enjoy that kind of stuff too, and I think that's why they're my kind of favorite episodes too, and especially with the stuff that we do with Twope News. I really enjoy it when we talk about a concept, and then a week later, or that week, we've got like some bit of news to kind of come with it, being like, oh, they're trialing it. But yeah, that's cool that you found that one. I think that was our Christmas episode.
Let me have a look. What number was it? It was
14.
number 6. Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Yes, it was. When was that released? 8 months ago. Would be about Christmas.
There you go. I think it was the Christmas episode.
Yeah, it was released on December 23rd.
Wow, that is commitment right there. Posting on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
So, what is your favorite Twope News story that we've covered? Because we've obviously discussed a lot of news, which is something that me and you are very passionate about. I think we've had a lot of discussions throughout the year of space launches, space drama. We've loved watching Blue Origin kick up a fuss and all that stuff.
Virgin Galactic launch as well. That's a good one. Yeah. So I've got 2 bits here. One has popped into my head while we were discussing, and one was my actual favourite news story. So the thing that popped in my head, and I'm gonna mention it as an honourable mention.
Okay.
Because it wasn't on Twope News, it was on the news section of Infinite Void, before we spun out to open these.
Nice.
It was early on, and I can't remember what episode it was because I'd have to go through and listen to all the episodes to see it in the old Infinite Void episodes. It was my infamous rant about electric scooters.
Oh yeah. Yes.
It was a piece of news about how electric scooters have been introduced, and I sort of said, "Oh yeah, they're really good. And I've used them, and I think they're really cool." And it quickly devolved into me ranting for about 10 minutes about how people are just ruining them and how they're great, but people don't know what they're doing.
Yes. I remember that now. That was hilarious.
Mm-hmm. I think we got comments on that. So
yeah, Matty's electric scooter rant.
The great scooter rant of 2020. That's
quality.
But my actual favourite news piece was generally just on sort of electric vehicles and the development of those over last year. Again, a sort of an area that seems to have absolutely exploded over the last 12 months or so. And then in particular, episode 9, we discussed Waymo trucks. This was the company Waymo who were using, they sort of got a trial going and had plans to have trucks, electric trucks that were autonomous, delivering things. And it's my favourite episode because we were completely right. We were way back on the Infinite Void, we talked about how, at least in the near future, it made absolute sense for trucks to just sort of go between like a hub at the edge of one city, fill it up with things from the city, and then drive off automated down the highway to another hub near another city. And that's exactly what they're doing. And that's why it's my favourite news story. Not to be big-headed, but
no, that's fair. That's fair. So my fate. Well, I've had a few too because I think I've covered it quite a lot. I've been really interested in all of the fossil stuff that we've covered, and like the thawing of ice. I'm very interested in all the bacteria that's up in the permafrost and stuff like that. But for me, one of my favorite news segments was the Squids in Space one, where I can't fully remember now what the reasoning was behind it, but they sent a load of squids up into orbit, didn't they?
Yep.
And I think it was to like test the gravity on them or something like that. I can't really remember if I'm honest, but I really enjoyed that story because for one, it made a great name for a video, Squids in Space. You got to love the SEO for that. And for two, I just thought it was cool that a squid got to go to space before I did. Not that I might ever be able to go to space, but it's cool that there are squids going to space before I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, any animal in space story usually makes for good reading.
Yeah.
Whether it's ethical or whether the animal enjoyed it's another question, but it certainly sounds cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. So our next little bit now is kind of like a community dive in. So what we will do first is we will load up the least listened to episode. So anybody
I don't actually know what this is. So
okay, well, anybody playing at home that wants to play, you've got 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So our least played episode and argued least favorite episode is episode 35, The Future of Humanity, Part 6, Medical Technology. And I agree with that. Me and you knew nothing about it. It's pretty recent, but that's fair. I think if anybody even listens to it at the start, I think you even mentioned right away at the beginning that you're unsure about this, and so am I. So I will take that. I'm not too sad about that. And then our most listened to episode, which is a surprise to me, is episode 24, Simulation Theory, Part 1. What is simulation theory? And on our YouTube channel, it has like 200% more views than everything that we've got. So that's kind of cool. It's fun to hit the YouTube algorithm for a week or two. I remember I kept messaging you every day being like, we're getting hundreds of views. So
yeah. Was there did we ever sort of figure out what happened with that, or did we just get lucky? And
I'm not sure if I had to put like my like marketing cap on for a minute. It's probably the title, because it's one of the only ones that. See, I'm giving free marketing advice now to anyone that's listening, that's making a podcast. But it's one of the only ones that we've got where it's actually titled "What is then the topic we're talking about?" Because the rest of the ones that we kind of do, we have not difficult titles, but they're specific titles for what we're talking about, and they make sense. But that's probably why. Because I can imagine, like, say for instance, like the Artemis missions one, if that title had have been "What is the Artemis missions" in comparison to just 17 Artemis missions, then who knows? But I think that's probably why. But saying that, a little bit above, we did the same with AI and it didn't go the same way. So who knows? Maybe simulation theory was a popular topic in lockdown. Maybe people went into the rabbit hole. They're like, I'm working on a computer. My life is a computer. And then YouTube was like, oh, have you heard of simulation theory? They're like, oh, listen to this. And then they had a crisis from their bedroom.
Yeah, it was a good episode though. I remember that series as a whole. I really enjoyed sort of talking about, because I think out of everything, that was the one which we'd sort of held off like the lot for quite a long time. I think we reference it in just about that and AI. We reference it in just about every one of the early episodes and didn't get around to it for a couple of months. So
yeah. And I like the approach that we took too, because obviously we broke it down into 3 parts, didn't we? So we had like the introduction, which was like, what is simulation theory? Then we had the one on technology, which was really fun because we were taking just like a technological approach, like how much energy we need, all that kind of stuff. And then we had like a final thoughts episode too, which was much more like philosophical, and we referenced like the Plato cave experiment and stuff like that. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was one of the good ones we've done. And I liked that series was 3-parters as well. I don't know, like, listeners, if you're watching or you want to get in touch with us on social media, let us know in the comment section below, or at us on Twitter and Instagram at Infinite Void Pod. But what do you prefer? Do you like the long, like, episode series kind of thing, like Future of Humanity? We've got almost 10 parts now. Or do you prefer it when it's like a 3-parter, like simulation theory? But so we've been doing a poll for the last week that we have shared across all social media channels, and that poll was for everybody to go and vote on what their favorite episode was, because we thought we'd include you all, lovely bunch, as you've let us know. You've given us some great ideas in the past, and you've let us know when we have not got things right. So shout out to, I don't even know what we'll call you, so we'll just call you.
We need a fan base name.
Yeah, maybe the
Voiders.
The Voiders, yeah, the Voiders is cool. The Voiders, and then the Supreme ones can be called the Infinite Voiders.
Excellent.
When you listen to the podcast, you're a voider. When you've listened to all the episodes, you're an infinite voider.
When you subscribe to our Patreon,
you become the infinite voider. Our Patreon is also in the description below if anybody wants to click on that and check it out.
Nice slick plug.
Yeah. But yeah, so our community's favorite episode, as voted in the poll, is episode 10, the multiverse. So that's cool. I really enjoyed the episode. I think that was one of my ones. I'm fascinated by the idea of an infinite version of me, an infinite version of universes playing out in different ways. So that was probably quite a hopeful episode, looking at all of our titles, because it was probably the ones where we're like, well, even if everything goes completely wrong on this planet, there's an infinite version of planets where it might not go wrong.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm really struggling to remember back to this episode. It was quite a long time ago.
It was before biotechnology. It's got one of my favorite thumbnails though. I really liked all of the Earths going round in like a spiral. But
here's a side question then. What's your favorite thumbnail? If you just have a quick look through.
Okay.
I think I've got an answer for mine.
My favorite thumbnail is probably space tourism.
That's exactly what I was going to say as well.
Yeah, that one looks wicked. And I remember when we made that, because we were talking on the chat, weren't we? I was like, this one's cool. This one looks cool. I to be honest with you, I found all the ones that have space involved in it just look better, because obviously our branding's quite dark. And when you can have a planet against a black background, I think it just looks good with all of our like grid formats and everything.
Yeah.
But
the artificial intelligence ones work as well, because they're usually like an ethereal head.
yeah, I like those, especially the part 5 one where it's like a human turning into like code. That one was cool. And the simulation theory ones, to be fair, I like the first simulation theory one where it's like a matrix with like a guy looking at a city all in code as well. But yeah, that's been another thing that I've really enjoyed, just the branding for the Infinite Void. It's been fun. I probably have as much fun making the artworks as I do recording the episodes, because it's just fun trying to go and find things that kind of relate to what we're talking about in the week.
Yeah.
But
so yeah, I'd just say to everyone that Jacob really is the creative mind behind literally everything that you see. I applaud him. I will give my hats off to him. Is that everything that you see on the Infinite Void, it was sort of originally his idea, and sort of I guess I just tagged along with some sciencey stuff.
Well, you bring the brains, don't you? You've got the knowledge, because like, I think if anybody was following me before I started this podcast, I wanted to do a science podcast, but obviously I just didn't know enough about it. So when me and you got in touch with each other, it just seemed to work, and it's fun. We have a good dynamic, because it's like you're saying, I can kind of like do the socials and marketing and branding stuff, and you get to bring all the stuff that I don't understand and the science, and it's fun. I think it works. One thing that I would say as well that I really like about the Infinite Void is there doesn't seem to be many like things out there that kind of combine like creativity, like art almost, with science. There's not many things that do that. And I know we don't really do that because it's just thumbnails and like overlays and stuff, but I do like the approach that we have. Like it doesn't look like school textbook stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's not boring to look at. It's quite engaging. But you never know, that might just be mine and yours opinion. But yeah, it's been a pretty interesting first year. I'm sure we've got many more episodes to come, and hopefully many more years. You never know, it might turn into something crazy, or we might have some more offshoots in the coming months and future years. You never know. But I've really enjoyed it so far. I think it's been really fun, and it's allowed me to like learn, and I hope all the listeners and watchers have like learned with us and have managed to kind of build an opinion on some things. Hopefully we haven't swayed them too much or influenced anybody too much. And if anybody was really positive and is now super depressed, we're sorry. And anybody that was really like depressed and is now optimistic because we've given some kind of cool solutions, then hey, that's great. But yeah, if you want to let us know what your favorite episode was, if you didn't get to vote in the poll or anything, let us know in the comment section below if you're watching us on YouTube. And make sure to like the video, because it always helps with the algorithm sharing our content. And if you're listening on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you hit that subscribe/follow button. And if you can leave us a review, leave us a nice one, because that also helps with charting and ranking and being suggested to new listeners. And if you're not watching on YouTube and you've got no other way to get in touch with us because you listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or Google, then follow us on social media at Infinite Void Pod, where you can keep up to date when we post new episodes, which is usually every other Friday. You can comment on them and let us know what you thought instantly. You can recommend news segments to us for Twope News, and that social media account on Instagram and Twitter also kind of shares everything that me and Matty do, so you can keep up to date with us. But if you do want to follow us, I'm at Jacob E. Carson, and Matty is at the Matty JMP.
Still not got that handle yet.
Almost. One day you'll get it. One day. And yeah, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed our 1 year special as much as we have enjoyed making all of this content for the last year. And here's to year 2, and hopefully we can carry on producing episodes that you all enjoy. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yeah, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.